Sabhaye Namaha. Especially we Indians are to be proud that we had lots of seers, sages, saints who made us to walk on righteous path, right path. Therefore, we are always indebted to them because unless they show us right path, we might have not followed properly to gain the successful life and peaceful life. In this regard, we are always thankful to the sages on this earth who made us to be a good citizen. In ancient times, especially in 7th to 9th century AD, there was lot of infusion between Shaiva Vaishnava devotees. There was also Veera Shaiva, Veera Vaishnava. At this juncture, there was a great Tamil poet, Manicka Vachakar. He composed Thiruvasakam, which attained very famous stotra in Tamil Nadu. From that day till this day. It is recited in front of Nataraja Swami at Chidambaram. Even now, we can find Tiruvembavai can be recited by all Shaiva devotees. In the same way, Tiruppavai, 30 pasurams, praising the worship of Andal, Goda Devi, at the time of Dhanurmasa, in the midst of December to midst of January, at Vaishnava temples, Vishnu temples. In this way, regarding Thiruvasakam, Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi was very much pleased and preached to his disciples. Even when Bhagavan's mother was on deathbed, he made his disciple to recite Thiruvasakam to give her attainment of moksha. In this regard, in Tamil Nadu, Manicka Vachakar attained very good fame and name from that day to this day. Such a holistic nature was presented at that time by our seers. In this regard, I used to say, we are always thankful to the ancient saints and sages and monks. Because of them, we came to know which is right and which is a wrong path. They each and every minute, they sacrificed their lives for the sake of us, our generation. That's what we have to learn from such a seeds. In this way, we can see the value of Thiruvasakam not only in India, even foreign countries also, it is attained name and fame. Even in Thailand, even today, people used to recite Thiruvasakam composed by Manicka Vachakar. In Thiruvasakam, it denotes the greatness of God and how to attain moksha and what are the ways to reach God so easily. In this way, so many solutions given in Thiruvasakam. That's why today I have chosen the topic of Manicka Vachakar and Thiruvasakam, because we people should remember the great persons, great saint-like persons. Otherwise, their efforts towards us will go in vain. It should not go into vain. We can't clear the debt of the sages. We are always indebted to them. So in this regard, let us get detailed description of Manicka Vachakar and Thiruvasakam before that prayer. Maduram madurebhyopi mangalebhyopi mangalam pavanam pavanebhyopi harer namaiva kevalam. In the 7th and 9th century AD, there appeared in South India, especially an upsurge devotional fervor that completely transformed the religious inclination and practices of the region. Vaishnavas and Shiva Bhaktas became infused with a religious spirit that emphasized ecstatic devotion to a personal deity rather than the more sober rites and rituals of Vedic Brahmins. It was both a populist Hindu revolt, since it expressed the people's dissatisfaction with the hierarchies of caste and demonstration of contempt for the alien philosophies of Jainism and Buddhism, which had by then permeated large area of South India. The movement's leaders were the various saints who toured the countryside singing songs in praise of the personal God, mean their personal God. The language of these songs was toured the countryside singing songs in praise of their personal God. The language of these songs was deliberately simple, for they were intended to be sung by even ordinary devotees, either alone or in groups. While it is true that the deities addressed were once such as Vishnu and Shiva, who were prominent components of the North Indian pantheon, the mode of expression and the philosophical content of the poems were unique. Being an expression and the philosophical content of the poems were unique. Being an expression of the indigenous Tamil spirit and culture. This was the first of the great bhakti movements that were to invigorate the Hindu tradition throughout India in the succeeding centuries. It was so successful in transforming the hearts and minds of South Indian population. One commentator has gone so far as to say that these poet saints sang Buddhism and Jainism out of South India. Adi Shankaracharya, who taught in South, especially in South India in the 19th century, successfully vanquished the Jains and Buddhists in philosophical debates, but at the grassroots level, it was the singing saints who reconverted the masses back to Hinduism. The Saiva revival of this era owed much to four saints who are often collectively referred to as the Nalvar, the four, or upper. The first to emerge flourished from the end of the 6th century until the middle of the 7th. Tirujnana Sambandar, the next to appear, was a younger contemporary of his. They were followed by Sundaramurti and Manicka Vachakar, who most people believed lived in the 9th century AD. The spontaneous songs of these early Shaiva saints were eventually collected and recorded in a series of books called Tirumurais. The first 7, there are 12 in all, are devoted exclusively to the songs of Tirujnana Sambandar, Appar and Sundaramurti, which are known as the Tevarams. While the 8th contains Manicka Vachakar's 2 excellent works, These 12 Tirumurais along with the later Mekanda Sastras became the canonical works of the southern Shaiva branch of Hinduism. This system of beliefs and practices still in most prevalent form of religion in Tamil Nadu. Though two of Manicka Vachakar's works survive and are both included in the Saiva canon, his justly deserved fame and reputation as being one of the foremost Tamil saints and poets rest almost exclusively on the eminence of the work of Thiruvasakam. The Thiruvasakam is and also has been for more than 1,000 years one of the most well known and the best loved works of Tamil devotional literature. It is so highly regarded that extracts from it are chanted every day in many South Indian homes and temples even today. Portions of Thiruvasakam were chanted regularly during the early days of Sri Ramanashramam, and on the evening that his mother died in 1922, Ramana Maharshi asked some of his assembled devotees to spend the night chanting the whole work. Kunju Swami, who was present on that occasion, had described what had happened. During that night, Sri Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi sat near the place where we had put the mother's body. Brahmachari Arunachala Swami and I sat with him. Brahmachari Arunachala Swami told originally being a cook in that big temple in town before he renounced the world and became a devotee of Sri Bhagavan. Sri Bhagavan then announced that the Thiruvasakam should be chanted. Sri Bhagavan and devotees took it in turn to read from the book. While we were reading, Sri Bhagavan corrected all the mistakes in our reading as and when we made them. In this way, we went through the entire Thiruvasakam before 4 a.m. Bhagavan and his mother sitting in the courtyard of Skandashramam. Kunju Swami is sitting on the right. A similar incident took place on June 22nd, 1939, when Bhagavan announced that it was Manicka Vachakar's Guru Puja or Aradhana Day. Having made the announcement, Bhagavan sat in deep silence for so long time that the sanctity of the occasion sank into our souls. There were several occasions on which Bhagavan expressed his highly opinion of Thiruvasakam. Vishwanatha Swami has reported in the following incident. Vishwanatha Swami was sitting with Bhagavans in the 1920s. While Sri Bhagavan was living in Virupaksha cave, devotee requested him to compose a hymn that could be sung when they went out for Bhiksha. Sri Bhagavan said, "When there are so many excellent hymns such as Devarams and Thiruvasakam, where is the need for a new one?" At this request, Bhagavan recited lines from composition of the Saint Manicka Vachakars, where the author spoke of the condition of the soul melted in love. Hardly had the Maharshi pronounced a few lines when there was brilliance in his face. He who surely expresses in any outward form his inner emotion could not restrain a few silent tears. A slanting ray of the morning sun from the hillside made the scene still more vivid. A peace that passes all understanding pervaded the whole atmosphere. For more than an hour, there was a perfect silence. It looked as if one of the fresco paintings of Ajanta had come to life. The Vedantic tradition in Sri Ramana Maharshi by Swami Siddhaswarananda. Manicka Vachaka's Thiruvasakam is a part of sublime beauty and forms subject of an outstanding study. Manicka Vachakar's expression of the absolute love and faith in God, man, and the world, and of translating such joy into exquisite poetry. In order to interrupt this form of poems, this kind of testament of love, we found it essentially to formulate an acceptable general idea of great poetry gleaned from the theories of poetry advanced by the seers of the East and the West, and proceeded then to interpret the essence of the beauty of the thought and the diction embodied in each section of these wondrous poems. The work of translating this poetry of incantation has never been an easy one, and attempts have been made by many reputed scholars to translate the stanzas Thiruvasakam from Tamil to English. In our translation, we have tried to render in terms of feeling rather than of intellect those profound experience of the poet whose communication to our minds depends on all our relevant feelings and impulses being raised into the completest harmony. In the absence of an adequate terminology of feeling, we were compelled to adopt the static intellectual turns to the dynamic realities of feeling. For a fuller appreciation of Thiruvasakam, readers are requested to refer to standard editions like Dr. Pope's monumental work on Thiruvasakam. References which are made in our work to the cantos, adhyayas, and poems in Thiruvasakam follow also the patterns and order adopted in standard editions both in Tamil and English of Thiruvasakam. It's a light to bear upon the great issues that appear in religious experiences. The ascent of the soul, Atma, from the human to the divine, from time to the eternal, from the many to the one power of Manicka Vachakar's poetry. Such a greatness was imposed to Manicka Vachakar's works, Thiruvasakam. We have sought to follow the avenues where the intense expression of religious feeling is indissolubly linked with the wider connection of emotion in this poetry. An approach also has been made to understand the soul of Saint Manicka Vachakar by means of his poem. In the perfection of its fine poetry, into which we impersonally enter, we behold the perfection of all things and are one with that perfection. Poetry is a fine medium for what? To pay homage to the absolute truth. Shashvata Satyam. And the reality of the truth makes a sovereign claim the poetry that it may well be said that great experience gives rise to great poetry. Thus in Thiruvasakam, all that is offered to the sum of perfection has both the unity of inspiration and sublime grace of art consciousness asserting its radiance over all the principalities and powers of this world. All great poetry represents art is beauty refracted through artist's mind. For where? To the world. Saint Manicka Vachakar's delight in his own private ecstasy. But his artistic expression in Thiruvasakam is for the uplift and rapture of humanity. In Thiruvasakam, it is totally explained in detailed description. In Thiruvasakarajya, the world is realized and expressed as a unity and as a harmony as described by the poet. The spontaneous expression of pure and human nature. In this manner, we have tried to understand the poetic genius of Manicka Vachakar as the instantaneous harmony of the fullest emotional realization, so aptly defined by Lascelles in his essay on the idea of great poetry. Thiruvasakam. What is it? It is a volume of Tamil hymns composed by the 9th century Shaivat Bhakti poet Manicka Vachakar. It contains 51 compositions and constitutes the 8th volume of the Tirumurai, the sacred anthology of the Tamil Shaiva Siddhanta. Legend has it that Manicka Vachakar was appointed as a minister by the king Arimarthanar and sent to purchase 10,000 horses from Arab traders, but spent the money building a temple in Tirupperundurai. See the greatness of the Thiruvasakar, who worked as a minister at the court of Arimarthanar. He gave money to purchase 10,000 horses, but he could not purchase. Instead of that, he spent that money to build a temple, especially in Tirupperundurai. As the legend goes, Thiruvasakam is the only work which is signed as well as written by Lord Shiva in guise of a Brahmin when narrated by Manicka Vachakar. It's what a wonderful. Manicka Vachakar was telling, Lord Shiva in this disguised form was writing. The poet chased the writer, but without success, but the palm leaf manuscript had been seen inside the locked sanctum sanctorum in Moola Virat of Thillai Nataraj with the Lord's signature. By seeing the signature only, he came to know that Lord Nataraja wrote himself while he was narrating the scenes. Manicka Vachakar, Thiruvasakam and Tirukovayar are compiled as 8th Tirumurai and is full of visionary experiences, divine love, and urgent striving for truth. Though he did not counted as one of the 63 Saiva Nayanars, he is counted as one of the Nalvars, 4 men, army like, consisting of himself and the first 3 Nayanmars, namely Appar, Sambandhar, Jnana Sambandhar, Sundarar. He was born in an Orthodox Brahmin family in Tiruvattarur near Madurai. His father was an advisor to the Pandya king and he followed his father's footsteps in becoming the king's minister. He is believed to be in the 10th or 11th century AD. He was a king's prime minister and renounced his post in search of divinity, Daivatva. The king bestowed his minister to buy horses, but he was taken to divinity by the vision of Shiva with his saints. The minister spent entire his money in constructing a temple at Tirupperundurai considered an architectural marvel among Hindu temples. From the time the saint poet understood and wandered to various temples and devoted hymns on Shiva. His conversion is means he whose heart is not melted by Thiruvasakam cannot be melted by any saying. Such a great work is Thiruvasakam. It melts the hearts of the devotees, even to the gods. George Pope in Italy compared Manicka Vachakar to the likes of Saint Paul and Saint Francis. Pope became interested in Tamil and learned the language during a 6-month ship voyage to India. An English translation of Thiruvasakam appeared in 1900. He found a close affinity to the utterances of sincere devotion, such verses as longing for devotion alone. His love demands my all. His translation made like this. How? Let us see how they were given their quotations. Victory to the Tirujnana Sambandhar. Why? He attributed to Sivajnana Bodham, a Saivite work by Manicka. He was an orthodox Saivite and represented Bhakti at its highest form in his age. Tirupperundurai, also known as Avadayar Koil, is a Shiva temple where Thiruvasakam is believed to have been originated. Manicka Vachakar is said to have converted the king to Shaivism and built the temple with money that had been intended for war horses. There is a famous saying, Thiruvasagathukku uruga, Uruvasagathirukkum uruga. In such a way, he recited. When he got the familiarity, the abroad people quoted and translated in their language the Thiruvasakam of Manicka Vachakar. Some quotes from Thiruvasakam. Victory to the foot of the king, who soothed my soul's unrest and made me his. Victory to the jeweled foot of Pinnagan, whose severe continuity or birth. Victory to the anklets of the king, rejoicing mid those that fold adoring hands. Victory to the flower foot on him, who is far from those without. Victory to the anklets of the glorious one, who uplifts those that bow their head. And in places, Pope mentions the difficulty about translating these Tamil poems to the proper meaning in English. Lord Shiva's followers means devotees of Shiva. Most of the portions in Thiruvasakam is first sung in Tillai Nataraja temple at Chidambaram. It is considered one of the profound works of Tamil literature, and it discusses every phase of spiritual path from doubt and anguish to perfect understanding in Shiva, from earthly experience to teacher-disciple relationship, and ultimately freedom from rebirth, Punarjanma. There are 658 poems in the work, and along with 400 poems in Tirukovayar by the same author, make it the 8th volume of Tirumurai, the 12-volume Shaiva canon. The author finds both theistic and pantheistic ideas corresponding to medieval India, but identifies God with the universe. Manicka Vachakar often finds himself unworthy of Lord Shiva being his savior. Kadayavane karunayinal kalandu ஆண்டு கொண்ட விடையவனே. It is said that this made Lord Shiva feel sorry for Vachakar and blessed him. As a devotional literature, it finds alternatives between joy and sorrow. Thiruvasakam, the early morning wax-up songs sung by Lord Shiva on Tamil month Margai, are part of Thiruvasakam. Thiruvasakam songs were composed in Annamalayar temple. In Thailand, an annual giant swing ceremony known as Thirupavai was held in major cities until 1935, when it was aborted for safety reasons. The name of the ceremony was derived from the names of Thiruvasakam and Thirupavai, a Vaishnava hymn of Andal. It is known that Thiruvasakam verses opening the portals of Shiva's home were recited at this ceremony, as well as the coronation of the toy king. Thus, Manicka Vachakar brought glory not only to our nation, even to the international level. So, let us bow down to his feet. Sri Akantaya Kalyananide Nidedram Sri Venkatnivasaya Srinivasaya Mangalam Mangalachasanaparairmadacharya Purogamaihi Sarvesha Purvairacharya Satkrutajyastu Mangalam.